things like that. But tonight we're going to talk about some other ways that we can remedy this. And some surprising ways, as you'll see. Let me see if I got this one. Might be two there, I don't know. I'll put those there. Okay. Where's Janice tonight?
She's on her way, supposedly.
Uh-huh, yeah. I can't figure out why my throat's getting dry tonight. Okay. I'm going to read the little paragraph at the top. All of us have ancestors that did not leave a paper trail or much of a paper trail in our genealogy. This can be frustrating and hinder our research. In this teaching, we will learn how to deal with this problem and find possible solutions. We will also talk about how you can leave your own paper trail so that your future family genealogist can find you and hopefully won't have to go through the frustrations you have had to go through. Have you even thought about your own paper trail? You know, in 100 years, you're going to be an ancestor to somebody else. Well, 50 years, 75 years, not even 100 years. So why not now make it easier for them? Think about what you're having to go through with what you're trying to find. Maybe you can make it easier for them. One of the first things I wanted to talk about was how portable was your ancestor? When I say portable, is how movable were they? Now, I have a set of ancestors that are from the state of Ohio. They came here considered late, actually, in the 1850s. I don't know why that's considered late unless they mean anybody that didn't come in the 1600s is considered late. But they settled in a county named Wyandotte County, Ohio. And when they came actually through Pennsylvania and made their way. When they settled in Wyandotte County, Ohio, they did not leave. So mining records in that county is extremely easy because also that county kept their records. So that family for me is very easy. In fact, so easy I kind of get bored. You know, because I got all this different, it's great and wonderful. But I also have ancestors that I cannot find a thing on. I don't even know where they went. I can find them here, and then they're gone. So we all have them. Thing is think about your ancestors and if they're portable. Do you know what your ancestors' lifestyle was like? Now, I think looking at who's here tonight, most of us are pretty serious researchers. We are not the ones that just look for the birth dates, the death dates, the marriage dates. We go further. We look for all the little interesting tidbits. We look for, you know, where did they go to school? Who were their boyfriends? We want to know about their character, about what kind of people they were. So what was their lifestyle like? Now, if you're thinking about your grandparents or people that you actually knew, sometimes it's more difficult to think about their lifestyle because you may have known them as grandma. Now, my grandma was not a very, let's see, what's the word I want to use, kind of out there person. She was very timid, very quiet. But when I researched her childhood, I found that wasn't necessarily the case. She liked to go dancing. And I did not know that, which was not a bad thing. I'm just saying I could not see my grandmother going dancing. I also found out that she lied on her marriage certificate, which my grandmother never lied. She lied about her age so she could get married. And that was not anything that my grandmother would have ever done. But facts are facts. So those are things you can find out. Have you ever thought about how portable that makes them? Their lifestyles, their jobs, you know, what they did for a living, where they went to school, who they married, what family they married into. Those kinds of things makes their lives more portable. They could have moved. They could have gone somewhere else. One thing we have to remember to not do is to get stuck on, well, my ancestors were in Houston County, Tennessee, and they never left. I know it for a fact. You can't get stuck on that. You have to open up your mind and think, well, maybe they went to visit Aunt Sally, and that's where they died. I don't know how many people have told me, well, they had to have died in Houston County. That's where they live their whole life. Well, there's times when they get older, they have to go live with their children or go live with other family members or friends. Or they're put into other places. They have to take care of their health. So they have to leave the area. We can't get stuck on what we think we know. Did they have skills that could easily be used in a new location? Think about railroad people, men and women, even women, who worked on a railroad. We had a railroad that came through Houston County. You know, another thing that is very prevalent in my husband's family, which took me years to understand this. His family would go north to Michigan to work in the factories for a certain time of the year. Then they'd come back here and they'd work on the farm a certain time of the year. It took me the longest time for me the concept of why they would do that. Well, it was self-preservation. They had to make a living. And when there was no farming here, they weren't making a living. So my husband was born in Detroit, but all his family has been here since the 1800s. And it's the same, from what I could tell from this area, people went to Michigan, Illinois, or Missouri, normally, to work in the factories. So you have to think about things like that. Did your ancestor have an occupation that required some capital that was not easily portable? Some of our ancestors could easily start anew in new locations. Others could not. When researching our ancestors and you seem to have lost the paper trail, ask yourself these insightful questions. They may just help you find the paper trail again. So think about that. Try not to be stuck on that, well, I know they were here. Think about it. They may have gone somewhere else for whatever reason. The next one. Did someone else leave a paper trail for your ancestors? That seems kind of odd. Why would someone else leave a paper trail for my ancestor? Well, the way that the context is that your ancestor may not have even known that they had left this paper trail for them. And we'll talk about places that would have happened. But I would like to ask Ms. Helen Moore to share something with us that will show you what I'm talking about. Ms. Helen.
I was going through a stack of stuff yesterday, and I have a lot of stacks of stuff. And I have no idea why I kept this letter other than because this particular great aunt of mine was very special to me. She and I were very close, and she would type letters to me, and I would type letters back to her. And this was a letter I received from my Aunt Sally. This was my grandmother's older sister. There were 3 girls in the family, my Aunt Sally and Clara, which is my grandmother, and all in Ohio. Like Melissa said, they'd been in Ohio for forever and ever and ever. First families of Ohio, stayed in Ohio, had never left Ohio. Always in Ohio. And I'm reading through this letter the other day, which I didn't even remember getting, and she was talking to me. I went to a DAR school, and it was from kindergarten through 12th grade, all on one campus, and she was trying to impress on me how fortunate I was that I could go to the same school for my whole schooling, from elementary through high school. So she said, in context of that, she said, would you believe I went to 3 different schools before I was out of 3rd grade? And that included 5 different towns and cities. I started to school in Portsmouth, Ohio, went 1 week, moved to Columbus, Ohio, then to a little town out of Columbus called Milo, then on to Newark, Ohio, went to 2 different schools there, and then we moved to Dayton, Ohio. I went to the first half of the 7th grade, and then we moved to Indianapolis, Indiana, was ready to graduate from the 8th grade, and we moved back to Dayton. That was the end of my schooling until I was 20-some years old. I enrolled in the Greater Dayton Shorthand School and took typing. It was the smartest thing I ever did. Anyway, she goes on to say that someday I'm going to make somebody a fine little secretary, which I thought was cool. But anyway, but I had no idea, first of all, that my grandmother, because she would have been with the family,
Right.
So you mentioned the railroad, because my great-grandfather was with the railroad.
Yes.
So I'm sure that's why they were doing all this incredible moving around. But I had no idea they ever lived in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that was interesting, Anyway, but, yeah.
And this is in a letter And so she's telling where she went to school, but like she said, her parents would have been with her.
So I can back into
You could, yes.
exactly what age my grandmother was at
Yes.
each one of these places.
Yes. Out of a letter that Helen herself had received, had forgotten she received,
Right.
and had just recently found.
Right. My grandmother never left me that kind of information.
Right. So this is information that is a gold mine of information. It shows from year to year where this person went to school, which means from year to year where her parents lived. That gives her more places to look for records. Tax records, school records, property records.
And there was so much moving around that you'd never catch all that in census records.
No.
Because there's too much gap.
Well, it could happen, in that 10-year gap
Right.
that we all hate, the census records, So that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, is these records that we really don't think about, but can really help us. We are always looking for documents and records that our ancestors produced themselves by way of filing for a marriage record, buying property, paying taxes, etc. Have you ever thought about the fact that others could have produced records that would have your ancestor in them, even without your ancestor really knowing about it? Below is just a few record types that might list your ancestors that others produced. This is just a short list. There are tons of records under this type category. The first one is pretty obvious, newspapers. Now, I'm going to tell you that what we're going to talk about in these types of records, it's not going to be an easy go on the computer, click, 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 and it's there. You may actually have to go to repositories. You may have to actually do some digging. But if you're stuck, that's what we do. We dig. So newspapers. Your ancestor may not have published anything in newspapers themselves. However, they can still be named in articles having to do with just about anything. So I always tell people, when you're looking in newspapers, we always look for what? The obituary, a birth announcement, a marriage announcement. That's about it. I tell my students, read the whole newspaper. If your ancestor lived in an area for a certain period of time, read those newspapers from the beginning to end, because you do not know when you're going to find the family listed in something.
There's one that I just so happen to look up on that I could not find when this particular grandfather passed away. It had no clue what happened, nothing. It just so happened in the newspaper, it had who's in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And I found him in there, and the next issue, he had passed away. So I could narrow down a death date from when he was in the hospital versus when his obituary was done. And that's the only way I found his
And that in the hospital was what? This big?
It was just very
It was
tiny.
that big.
And if you wasn't really just looking, like she said, page by page by page, I was going, I know he's here, and that's the only thing that had his name until the next one when he had his obituary.
And I don't know if you did this, but I know I've done it. You may have to go through 20 newspapers before you get to that one.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are truly stuck, and if you're truly having trouble, we have to resort to those things. Local organization reports of meetings and events. Now, they don't do it quite as much as they used to, but in the old newspapers, the organizations like Home and Demonstration Clubs, Lions Club, Friends of the Library that had anything that had an event, most of the time they would list people who brought food, people who attended, if there were prizes given, who won a prize. Your ancestor could be listed. You can't find them in a deed or a tax book, but you can find them going to that potluck and they brought macaroni salad. It's crazy, but sometimes that's what we have to resort to. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Just throw something at me. There you go. There you go, sweetie.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. Trustees' report of overdue taxpayers. I don't know that they published that today, but if you have not paid your taxes after so many years, they used to print your name in the newspaper. I didn't know if they still did
Yeah,
that.
it's called delinquent taxes.
Well, okay. Well, guess what? They have done it for hundreds of years. Your ancestor maybe didn't pay their taxes. They could be listed that way. And if it's the only, if you don't have anything in your ancestor to find him listed on anything, we do the happy dance. It's just, if you've been searching and searching. Gossip columns. These they don't have today. But I absolutely love to read gossip columns. Most newspapers, up until, I guess, people started maybe suing the newspapers. Although I think a lot of it was reported by their own people. But they would have little articles, usually by community. They'd have the Danville community, or they'd have, Erin Personals, Magnolia. Right. And it was that wonderful thing that said, Mr. and Mrs. Jones went to the store in Clarksville on Saturday.
Waverly paper still does this.
Do they really? Surprise, surprise. Houston County did it, and theirs are wonderful. And I think people really like seeing their name in the newspaper. So I think they really, for one person to know that all this happened, it had to have been reported by somebody.
They used to have birthdays and all the different
Every little community had their own
Yes.
person.
That's right.
They don't have like, well wishes or
They did, yes.
heroes or something.
Yeah, it's pretty.
But these little community articles were so detailed and listed as many names, I think, as they could get into the little article. Because people wanted to see their name in print.
That's what I wish the ladies that write for the Stewart County and Houston County, instead of me thinking I'm sitting in church.
Yeah. I hear you.
Sermon every
Yeah, I know. The gossip columns, read them. You may, like I said, it may take newspaper after newspaper after newspaper. But if you know that, like the Stringfield family, Stringfield families we can pretty much find in Stewart. And so I would read the Stewart gossip column. And I can find Stringfield, I can find Rise, I can find all the little ones that were attached to them too. And you can just about, if you get enough of them, if they were in there enough, you can actually tell the story of what they did kind of day by day. Right. And yes, they would say, the Stringfield families, and they'll list them by name, are in for this particular funeral. Well, wait a minute. I didn't know they died then. I've been looking when they died. There you go.
One of the ladies that writes for the local paper, she will put in there who died, and then it'll be brother to, and it'll be tied into the community. And she does that for everybody. If they died away, they'll have
That's wonderful.
Aunt of this person or uncle of this
Yeah.
person. And it's pretty interesting.
And that also helps with your female ancestors. How many of us have seen those records that our female ancestors were listed as Mrs. Jim Jones? And we don't know what her first name is. So, and that was actually, that was a respect thing back then. That's just how you addressed, women. But we want to know what her first name is, because we're trying to find out. Court cases. Now, you may not think that your ancestor was involved in any court cases, and maybe criminally not, criminally maybe so. But also there were civil court cases. And the courts, I don't think they do that today in our paper, maybe in other papers they do. Do they list the docket for the upcoming court term?
those initiatives that the county newspapers
Right.
was coming out.
They sometimes list who was arrested.
That's good too. That's good too. That's good too. But they will list the court docket, because usually the next term of court, they have a term every 3 or 4 months. So they'll say, then the next term of court, we will be hearing these cases. And it'll be Jones versus Adams. It'll list them that way. Well, if you see a surname that you're interested in, then you can go to the court records and pull the court records. Local weather tragedies. How many of us have actually seen on TV, these TV reporters go down to, some southern town and interview the gentleman with no teeth that had the tornado go through his house? Well, it happened even in newspapers. Your ancestor may have been part of, a weather tragedy, and the reporter came through and interviewed your ancestor, or said the tornado went through the Watkins farm. If you're researching Watkins, I think I'd check into that. That's why I said read the newspaper. If you're doing your newspaper research, and I know, sitting in front of a microfilm, looking at these microfilms, that it would be very beneficial, especially if you have a family that was in an area for any length of time. Now, if they were, moved every year, you might have trouble. But check the newspapers, read them page by page. The next one is local organizations. Now, not all of our ancestors were involved with clubs or things like an organization for like the Home Demonstration Club or a flower club or a farming club, but a lot of them were, because it was either what their job was or it was what their passion was. A lot of these places have records. A lot of these organizations have records or newsletters or put out some sort of a journal. Like today, our local historical society puts out a newsletter every month. In that newsletter, at the very top, they list who was at the previous meeting by name. And then they list what the program was about and any other announcements. But they list who had attended the meeting. So in 100 years, Miss Pat, your name will be there. And your ancestors. And your future ancestors will say, oh, well, she was interested in history. She went to the Historical Society meeting. These are the kinds of records that you would find on that Percy website that I talked about. Farming clubs or groups could have membership lists and have records about your ancestors' crops or herds. Now, there are, let me think what the name of it is. There are books where, the cattle with the trade, is it not trade? What am I thinking of, Bill? No, not tattoo. What they called it? Brand, thank you. You had to register your brand. Do you still have to register your brand? Locally? Locally, though? You do?
Well, yeah, I think so.
Well, I know that we have books that they had to come into town and they had to record their brand, officially record it. And so that's another way you can find your ancestor. He may not be a social butterfly, but he might come in and record his brand. Freemasons, International Order of the Odd Fellows, Eastern Star. Yes, all those organizations that people were part of. Now, these organizations are very private when it comes to their records. However, if you can find out if the organization, usually International Order of Odd Fellows number, and it's a number, or Freemasons number, chapter number, whatever. If you can find out if they're still in existence, or if there is one in the area where your ancestors are from, contact the secretary of the organization. Send them a nice little letter, tell them what, you're doing genealogy research, you're researching this particular person, do you have any records? I've done this, and they've been very, very nice. They will tell you that our records are secretly, not secret, but private. They don't like to give out very much. But they'll give you something. I got something pretty much every time I asked. I would get the times that they were in service in that organization, but not a whole lot more. But at least it tells me they were there. Offices that they held, that they were, right. When they were transferred out, like if they moved their membership out, because they would have to have requested that. So that's another avenue to try to find records. Now at the bottom, local businesses. This one is a little more obscure, but it's there if you look. Your ancestors may have been listed in local business records that they did business with. Now, not as much today, but years ago, a lot of businesses kept ledgers. In those ledgers, on the top of the page would have your ancestor's name, and then it would be, flour, 25 cents, 5 pounds of flour, 25 cents, or, and it would list, and then it would list a payment, and it would just continually list and that was their account.
Let me tell you a story.
Oh, let me hear it.
My father-in-law died October the 3rd, 1970. 2 years ago, my graduation class had a 70th birthday, because we were all going to be 70. So Chuck and I went back home to Moundsville, West Virginia, Marshall County. And they're doing a lot of drilling there for gas and so on and everything in the county though. But anyhow, we decided we'd drive out into the area where Chuck is from. I'm a city girl. He was a ridge runner. And the little town is Glen Easton, West Virginia. So we come down the hill into Glen Easton. We've been riding around for a couple of hours, and we decided to stop, if the little store is still open, to get a Pepsi. And sure enough, the little store is still there. The old general store. So Chuck and I come in, and this woman about our age comes out, and Chuck says hi, and she says, well, you look familiar. And he says, well, I'm Chuck Blake, Pete's boy. She says, Pete's boy? And he said, yeah. She said, wait a minute. And she went and got a ledger where Chuck's dad died owing them $7. So help me God.
Well, I might run into that too.
He slammed a $20 bill down. He is retired from the U.S. Army and has quite an extensive vocabulary.
Now, that's just too funny. I won't guarantee that you might be asked to pay your ancestors' debts.
Oh my God, he didn't.
Be glad they didn't charge interest.
I would like to know but I wanted to see them. Oh, we like a home. Oh my God. If it shakes up there on Spring Street Hill, you don't know what.
That's so funny. But business ledgers, like Ms. Phillips talked about, like grocery stores, lumber yards, feed mills, they all kept records. In fact, they kept very good records. And if they survived, didn't they, Phyllis? They kept very good records. And if they survived, they're most likely in archives, like our Houston County Archives. We have some ledgers, and you'll actually probably have to go there and look at them. And they may not even be indexed, so you may have to sit there and just see if your ancestor's in there. But it's another way to try to find something.
What about churches?
This was just a short list, but churches, up north, records are much better. In the south, we have so many rural churches that even if they kept records, they don't exist, again, still today. Membership records, you hope you can find. I have not had very much luck finding a lot of membership records. Now, if you have a bigger...
My mom and dad got married.
As I say, now, yes, if you have a larger denomination, such as the Cumberland Presbyterian, Miss Susan Nightgore does a very good job. She does. She is the archivist for the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. She does an excellent job. Baptist, now, one thing to remember, too, is way back when, there were circuit churches. There were pastors that were called circuit riders that would travel from church to church. One Sunday he would preach at this church, the next Sunday it would be this church, and like that. And so hopefully you had people that knew how to read and write and could keep the records. Maybe the pastor kept the records. Let's just hope that they survive. So church records, yeah, Miss Ann, that's a very good idea too. Military records. Now when I say military records, it's not exactly what you're thinking. If you have an ancestor that was in the military, hopefully we've obviously searched for military records for them. One thing to keep in mind is that your ancestors served with other people. And those other people would have generated records such as correspondence, possibly statements or affidavits to help either your ancestor or other people get pensions. And I'm talking back in the Civil War days mainly. Check on those records. It is a tedious task, I'm telling you. If you know what unit, let's just say for Civil War, if you know what unit your ancestor was in, I would suggest that you look at some of his other comrades that he fought with. Look to see if they had pension records. If they received a pension, it's very possible that they could have asked your ancestor to write a letter, to sign an affidavit, to say, yes, I served with this man, we were this, this, and this. Your ancestor may not have a pension record, or may have records, other than his service record. But he could be in other soldiers' records. Like I said, it's very tedious. I actually have just recently learned, another researcher that I know is going through this process. Her ancestor was in a Civil War unit, and she is pulling and looking at every pension file of every man that was in that unit.
I come up with one. Of course, my answer that I was researching died in World War II. The family, one person will say one thing, one person will say another. This uncle was shot down. Nobody knew exactly what happened. I just so happened to look up and find the name of the ship that he was on. Having military family all through my family tree, I knew Navy, they always have a tour book that is always put together. I had no clue if this still was done during wartime. Sure enough, there was one. And I started looking through it page by page by page and finally found out exactly what happened to my ancestor. I knew exactly what plane he was in. I found out he was the radioman and not the pilot. He was in a two-seater plane. He was shot down by anti-aircraft. And it just so happened that once I found the tour book first, I got to digging around, and because they have declassified a lot of military records, I found it almost a verbatim account of when he was shot down. And that was just going, like she said, going through different records to get to there.
If you have an ancestor, I use Civil War because I know those pension records can be so rich. If your ancestor was in a battle, obviously he wasn't in the battle by himself. He had other men surrounding him. If he was wounded, he may not have been the only one wounded. That's why we check those, because they could have said, I was in the Battle of Gettysburg, and it was Mr. Jones, Mr. Thomas, and list who was with him when he was wounded. Because they had to prove to the Pension Bureau why they are to get this pension. So they're going to pull names, and they're going to say, I was with this one and this one. And like I said, it's tedious, but if you are at that point where you can't find anything, that could be a next step. The next one is estate inventory sales. How many of us, these are in probate records in the court systems. Even if your ancestor didn't leave a last will and testament, there could still be an estate sale. Today we have auctions, which are estate sales. Back then they had, which was pretty much the same thing, but they listed in the court records what the item was that was being sold, who bought it, and how much they paid for it. So if you know your ancestor was in this little community, narrowing it down as best as you can, in the time frame, you can go to the probate records, look up estate inventories, and start reading. You can scan, because normally it's listed what the item is they bought, the person's name's usually in the middle, and then how much they paid is on the right. So you just need to scan that middle column for the name of your ancestor or anyone by your ancestor's name. Because if they lived in the area, maybe they attended the sale, maybe they bought an iron skillet. I have found one of my husband's ancestors' husband, who I've been trying to locate, where he bought some stuff at an estate sale. So I can say, okay, I've lost him at this particular date, but he went to an estate sale 2 years later. And so I can document him there. He didn't leave the area. He was still there, hopefully. So.
Where you don't have a will,
Mm-hmm.
you'll find family members actually purchasing
Yes.
items from the estate sale.
Yes. You will. In fact, I've seen the deceased own spouse purchasing items that, her own items, I'm sure. Because when you have debts when you die, they sell off your property to pay your debts. So that's to me is a really, that's a jewel to look into is estate sales. Before I go to the next one, Mike Davis suggested a good one that I had not thought about. He saw the poster up there that said, "Remember me." And those are the bricks that are over here in Betsy Ligon Park that people have bought and in honor of one of their family members. Now, to us, we walk through and we see the bricks and we might notice and recognize some names or something. But think in 100 years. I'm sure the Historical Society has kept very good records of who bought what and who's what. But 100 years, your ancestor comes to this town knowing you lived here at some point. Let's say your family's lived here your whole life. Maybe someone bought a brick and put it there, and they go there and they find, well, there she is. Monuments, memorials. Up at Betsy Ligon Park, they have the pavilion, and I cannot remember if that is a CCC memorial or a railroad memorial. And there's names, all kinds of names.
Church pews.
Church pews.
Those in churches.
That's right. When you really think about it, there are a lot of things with names on them that we don't think about when we're doing research. Now, a lot of us are not in the areas where our families are. Like all my family's from Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania. And I'm not in that area to actually do the groundwork. Hopefully when I retire, that's what I plan on doing. But for now, I contact libraries, I contact archives, I contact anything I can, and I read a lot of the history of what's there to try to help me find anything. So that's a good idea. The next thing is the internet. Now, I know your ancestors were living 100 years ago. The internet was not even in existence. Al Gore hadn't invented it yet. I had to add that, Mike, didn't I?
Yes.
Thank you. Even if your ancestor lived, I know, that's right, bless his heart. Even if your ancestor lived way before the internet was ever invented, they could still be on the internet. Yes, they can still be on the internet. Many types of genealogical publications are coming online more and more every day, and a lot of these publications have genealogy information in them and are now online and could be searchable. Do you Google your ancestors?
Yes.
Do you Google your ancestors? You should write that on a sticky note and put it beside your computer. Do you Google your ancestors? You will be surprised. Now, if you have a very common name, I feel sorry for you. And you can maybe do, quotation marks and plus and kind of narrow it down. But Google your ancestors. Do you use all of the search engines to search for your not just Google? There's Yahoo, there's Google. I think last month or month before I gave you a search engine called Mocavo, M-O-C-A-V-O, I believe, .com. It is specifically a genealogy search engine. They're putting stuff on there daily. I think it's M-O-C-A-V-O. You don't know what you'll find. That's just it. It takes a second to put the name in there and just hit search. See what comes up. Like I said, if you do it on Google, Google now has Google newspapers. And I have found, I'm working on an ancestor of my husband's right now, part of the Burnine family that are here in the area. He was born in Stewart County in the 1830s. He joined the 14th Tennessee as a Confederate. He was captured at the Battle of Gettysburg, sent to Maine to a prisoner of war camp. After the war, he stayed in Baltimore City for the rest of his life until he died in 1924. And in 1890, he shot and murdered a man on New Year's Day, January the 1st, 1890. I have, just by doing Google searches on Google newspapers, I have found 20 newspaper items about that murder by just searching his name in the city.
You got me interested, obviously. You went to Google.
Yes. Actually, I believe you can probably go to Google and put in Google newspapers first to get you to that search engine.
Okay.
I would do that first because I believe you should do it that way. But I think you can get it just by Google, but I would try Google newspapers. Go there, find the search box, and then put your name in. Actually, and somebody who's more computer savvy than me, I had a difficult time copying or getting the articles to print. So I had my husband work on it. He knows how to get around whatever you need to get around. I don't think Google wants you to print them, but he figured it out. But they're there. They're the actual newspapers. It's not a transcription. It's not an index. It's the actual newspapers. And they're putting newspapers on there all the time. So go back periodically and check again. The last thing we're going to talk about, and this is just a few record sources. I mean, we could talk all night long about different records that your ancestors could be listed in that are not the basic records. So try to keep your mind open when you go to libraries, when you go to archives, courthouse, wherever you go, look at everything. Because you don't know when they're going to pop up.
And Google has your newspapers by state.
Okay, by state.
So you could even narrow it down by state.
Okay. So it's actually a fairly recent addition to Google. The last thing we're going to talk about is how to leave your own paper trail. Remember in the beginning we talked about, we're going to talk about not frustrating your future ancestors by not leaving your own paper trail. Most of the people in this room, you are probably considered your family's genealogist, family historian, the one that keeps up with the old stuff, the one that does that genealogy stuff that everybody rolls their eyes and their eyes is glaze over, when you try to talk to them about it. Well, but you have a very important job, because if you're not doing it, who else is doing it? If you're not doing it, how will future generations know about your family? They may not want to know a lot of them, but there's always going to be one that wants to know. I'm the one in my family. Joetta, you're the one in your family. Seems like there's always one that gets that, whatever it is, to do this. Mine came late. I didn't start this until I was already married, and, a lot of my family was already dead and gone. But it doesn't matter when you come to it. If you're there, then embrace it and leave that paper trail for your ancestors. Make sure your genealogy is as organized as it can be. Because when you go pass on, your genealogy will be to whoever's in your family what they're going to do with it. So I would say make sure to leave some kind of instructions of what you've done with it. If nobody in the family wants it, then have it donated to an archives or a library or someone who takes those types of things. If you live in Houston County but your family's from Michigan, leave something saying, I want it sent to Detroit Archives. Otherwise, your family's going to go, look at all this paper, let's throw it away. And that's important stuff. Your research is important.
I've gone so far as, on Mom's side, I'm lucky. I have her sister, who is the other, she's the one that really started it years ago, being the family genealogist. I've come so far to where I say, what are you going to do with your genealogy records once you are no longer here? She said, I don't know. I have 6 children to divide it amongst, but yet they really don't have any interest in it. And then I just give her my sweet little look and bat my
That's right. Our pizzas are here, so I want to get through the rest of this. Photos. And I want to thank Miss Helen Moore. If you see the top, I said thank you, Helen Moore. Because she had Facebook messaged me and suggested we talk about some of these things, which helped me to determine what my subject matter tonight was going to be. Photos. Please label your photos. Please take your photos off of your camera and off of your phone and any other electric device that you have, and either put them on your computer, put them on a CD, put them on a thumb, put them somewhere. Get them off of your device. And then tag them with names and information. Yes, I know we have thousands and thousands of pictures. To me, the digital age has really not been the greatest thing for genealogy. It has in a lot of ways, but it's also hindered us because we take all these pictures at family reunions, and what does it do? It stays on our phone, stays in our digital camera. Nothing's ever done with it until you go to the next thing, and inevitably I erase them. I don't know how I do that, but I do. So, well, you're better at it than I am. Yes, ma'am. Uh-huh.
Stressing the importance of making that stuff accessible after you're gone.
Yes.
Because so many people have those things, even if they're stored digitally
Mm-hmm.
in a cloud or
Mm-hmm.
on
Yeah.
a computer or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and no one else knows their passwords.
Exactly.
So it's important to,
Mm-hmm.
with your will or
Right.
information that you leave for your ancestors,
Mm-hmm.
to leave them the
Passwords.
necessary information that they need to
Right.
access those records.
Passwords.
Otherwise,
Yeah, where your information is, where are your photos, where, you think about it, I guess we all think we're never going to die or something because we don't think about those things. Yes, yes. But please, take care of your photos. And I'm just as guilty as the next person. I have digital photos that are still on my digital camera. I have photos that are on my phone, but I can't get them off my phone. I don't know how. And so, but I have photos that are in my computer that I've taken in the last 10 years that I have not identified, put what the event was, or anything. Yeah, I have. Shame on me. We could talk about that every class. We could, yeah. Artifacts. How many of you have family heirlooms in your house that you've received down from your family? You have a bowl, you have a picture, you have this, you have that. Do you know, will your ancestor in 100 years know where it come from? Well, that's the bowl that sat in my great-great-grandmother's house for years and years. I have no idea where she got it. But you did know where you got it today sitting here. Tag it somehow. I have a bowl that my husband's great-aunt got at her wedding in the 1920s. It's a bowl on a pedestal. It's got a lid. I've written down the information. I put it in the bowl. You can buy the little tags that's got strings and it's got a tag attached to it, like for a tag sale. You can buy bigger ones where you can write on them. Write on there. Attach it to it. I mean, it look kind of funny in your house with all these tags on there. But at least when you're gone and when it's passed on, hopefully those tags and notes will go with it, and your future ancestors will know what this is from, how important it is, how expensive, and it's worth a lot of money. They'll hang on to it then. No, I would not. I would not. And please don't use a sticky label. Don't use anything with glue or sticky on it. Please don't.
And ink will go away.
Pardon me?
After
No.
40 years.
Well, I have stuff in the archives that's written in pencil that's still there. It's over 100 years.
Well, see, you've got special ink to all of us don't have special ink.
But do that. And then all of us have our own artifacts that we've collected in our lives. Our wedding gifts, birthday gifts, things that we've received that we consider special, that we want to say forever and ever. Write down when you got it, what the occasion was, so that in 100 years, it's that family heirloom, and they know where it comes from and the importance of it. And also remember, it's hard to die digitally. This was a kind of a statement that was out there here lately. I've seen on the genealogy things, it's hard to die digitally. You just think about that. Anybody in this room that does a lot of computer, Facebook, Twitter, text, anything, blogs, message boards, it's going to be there when you go. So that's one way your ancestors hopefully can find you. Most likely our future ancestors will find us online before they find us in paper records. That's becoming more and more probably the case, sadly, but probably is. In fact, what we seek in paper records will probably become totally digital. I would encourage you to have some sort of online presence that they can find. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean Facebook. There's a lot of people that do not like Facebook. Figure out something, some way. I don't know what else really what else could you do, Mike, besides Facebook?
Facebook, Google, there's blogs.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that
Yahoo.
set up their own blogs and blog about their family history. So,
And the thing about it, there's a program called Way Back When
uh-huh.
that will take you back as far back as the internet exists. And that's on, oh yeah,
No,
we're on there.
yeah. Ancestry.com. I mean, a lot of you don't have subscriptions. Some can't afford it. I understand that. If you have the opportunity to try to get a family tree on there somehow, some way, get it on there because then it'll be on there. Anything that can be searched and found. Be sure to put yourself out there.
If you've ever written anything,
If you've ever written anything. If you've been in the newspaper.
if you've been in a lot of different things like that, you can search a name and it'll show you
If you've,
when you wrote
yeah.
this for
Yes,
the
yes.
One thing you want to do when you put a search is always put quotations.
Yes. If you were in the newspaper, if you're, like I said, newspapers, here lately they've really started doing, and I'm so glad, because they're just so full. If your wedding announcement was in the newspaper, if your birth announcement was in the newspaper, if you were listed as a survivor in an obituary, so, so try to get an online presence of some kind. Leaving our own genealogy legacy could very well help our future ancestors. So that's what I would leave you with. Not only these tips on trying to find things for your ancestors of the past, but try to make a concerted effort to leave things for your future ancestors. It's something we don't think about. So, Jen, do you have any questions?
I ever noticed that those, with their tags, somebody's name on them on those bookshelves.
Oh, yeah, see, look here. Donated by the family of James Tilden Richardson. I mean, when you stop and look, there are family names and people names everywhere. So, we're going to stop with the class now because that's the lesson, and we're going to eat our pizza. And then I brought white glove material. So yes, I brought gloves. If anybody needs gloves, what I usually do, we have our pizza, and then I bring things from the archives that are original things, and we have white gloves, and we look at them because I want people to see what are in archives and encourage you to go to these places. Y'all are welcome to get pizza.